Hi everybody, welcome to another week. Hope you've had a great week. The stats coming out from the government appear that we're really doing well, so congratulations to everybody for the part that you play in helping us to get on top of the COVID virus. Last week we talked about, and I shared a parable with you about the parable of the chairs. The topic was God loves the world, and the key text was John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And I've got these two chairs. Obviously, this one's completely done up, and this one is in the process of being done up. And the whole point of the chair parable was simple. That God takes us, He sees us in our unrestored state. He sees us in our broken state. He sees us our broken and unrenewed state. But he is able to see the future, because only God can see into the future. And He goes, but this is what you're going to become. And even though there's nothing really attractive about the brokenness of the world that we live in, God knows that there's something more when He breathes His life, puts His light into us. And as the book of John reveals, life and light and glory, these words are communicated through John's gospel, that God has got this life and light and glory that He wants to put into that which He loves. And we're going to talk about today our response to God's great love for the world. And the question that we're going to ask is, how do we love the world that God loves so much? So, how do we love the world that God loves? This is our response to the way that God loves us. It's interesting as you go to the Greek and you look at the word world, you find that the word world throughout the New Testament is always referring to the many peoples, the human race right across the world. Obviously there's a number of different words used. There's nations, which is the Greek word ethnos, and then you've got the word world, which is cosmos, which we get the word cosmopolitan, meaning lots of different people. And whenever you see that the word world in the New Testament, predominantly it's talking about this idea of people who are not in line with God. The way of the world is not in line with God in general. And so we get this idea just by understanding that for God so loved the world, that is the many people that are not in line with His will, His purpose. They're not following His way. They're not obeying His voice or seeking Him. And yet we get this strong message, for God so loved, so agape, the love of God came upon this brokenness and world. And the question that has been coming to my mind is, how did God do that, and then how do I do that? I'm not God. None of us are God, right? And I don't know about you, but the idea of loving the whole world, well, theoretically I can say, yes, I love the world, but really at a singular, every person level, I can't do that. I'm human, one person. There's probably a bunch of people I can truly say that I love, but to love billions of people, only God truly knows billions of people. Only God truly knows every person and every detail of every person. And regardless of whether they are for Him or against Him, God still loves them. And then the question that comes to my mind is this idea that says, well, if God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, what did His Son do to reveal the love of God? And I just want a simple message today that comes out of the book of John. And we're going to read a little bit from John chapter 1. There's some interesting commentary at the beginning of John chapter 1, and then that commentary takes up just after Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus, where you get John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And it goes on, and John gives us some understanding of God's love and what Jesus' mission and ministry to the world is. But let me just read to you from John chapter 1, verse 10 to 14. He said, He was in the world, speaking of Jesus, the Word. He's already introduced Him as the creator of the universe, the creator of all things. But He became human. He took on human flesh. And it says, He, Jesus, was in the world, and the world was made through Him, yet the world, the cosmos, did not know him. And so this idea that even though he made it, they didn't recognize him. Why? Because God, who is eternal, who is invisible, immortal, becomes human. And they didn't recognize God in human flesh. And even came to Israel, the one whom God had chosen, his chosen people, to reveal himself, and they didn't recognize him. But then John says this, but to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will or the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word, Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory. Glory is the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And I guess I've been reflecting on this idea that Jesus' incarnation, him taking on humanity, him becoming human, taking on human flesh, was the greatest act of giving and of becoming the sacrifice of love for us. If Jesus hadn't have put flesh in the game, if he hadn't taken that step, there's no way that God could have revealed his love for us. But God gave his Son to become human. And as a result of that, Jesus' whole ministry is actually characterized not by actually doing things for every human, but you see him ministering to one person at a time. Yes, in crowds at times, but you see the gospel writers keep coming back to that God touches every person. And this is the amazing thing, that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. And Jesus came to Israel, and he came to Nazareth, and he came to Galilee, and you see this real thinning of attention that Jesus does in 3 years. Jesus doesn't touch the whole world in 3 years immediately. But through his ministry, which happened in 3 years, with a very small number of people in a very small country, then you have this going out that touches the rest of the world through the rest of the ages and then into eternity. And this is the amazing thing about God. And I've been thinking about, well, what does it mean for me to love the world? And to me, I realise this, that John talks about the world, you read it in chapter 1 and again in chapter 3. And this idea of the world being people who are not with God, they're opposed to God, they're not for God, they're ignoring God. And you know what? All of us were once in the world. And Paul talks about that in many of his writings, that we were once in the world. But in Jesus' high priestly prayer, he said, they are not of the world, I've taken them out of the world. And you know, the truth is about you and I is that we've been taken out of the world and heaven's been put into us. The glory of God has been put into us. The grace of God has been put into us. The truth of God, which all these things that John speaks about, the life of God, the light of God has come into this human clay, into this jar of clay. And God has filled us with his glory. Why? Because in the same way that Jesus became this jar of clay, God put his glory into that so he could reveal his light and his love, his grace and his truth to the whole world. And the question is how did Jesus do that? And how should I do that? And I guess the answer in short is that Jesus simply got involved. He got involved in normal things and he waited for the time for the supernatural. I want you to get that. He got involved in normal things and he waited for the timing for God's supernatural power to come into it. Just a simple story to get you thinking about that. Jesus, his first miracle recorded is before his ministry really takes off. He's got a few people following him, but he goes to a wedding and his mother's there, and it's in Cana. And by the way, you can actually see a reenactment of this. There's a really great new series called The Chosen, and they actually depict the wedding. And it's really interesting, the background and some of the understanding of cultural things that you pick up from that. But what I got from this story is that Jesus went and did something very normal. He ate, he drank, he celebrated marriage of these two people that his mother and probably he knew. And this was a normal part of life. And as would happen to a relatively poor family, they ran out of wine. And you know the story, and Mary comes to him and says, they've run out of wine, what are you going to do? And Jesus said, woman, you know it's not my time. So Jesus was doing something very normal. Jesus did a lot of normal things all the time. He ate, he drank. In fact, he was actually accused of being too normal because he actually hung around with the normal and actually the non-religious people, the sinners, the outcasts, the people that you shouldn't hang around with. Jesus was invested in them and spent time eating and drinking with them, going to their homes. Very normal. And he got involved. And I think it's in the getting involved that we see that what happens is that when Jesus said to Mary, it's not my time, and then Mary goes to the servants, hey, it's okay, just do whatever he says. And then Jesus gives them instructions to fill up these 6 pots with water. And then a miracle occurs in front of their eyes as the master of ceremonies he's given the cup and he goes, this is the best wine. And you see the supernatural power, and it says they began to believe in him. And you see that you don't get the supernatural unless you get involved in the natural. And I see the love of God doesn't actually get given unless Jesus puts on flesh and get involved. He doesn't get engaged with humanity to love humanity in a way that we could actually get involved with and receive until he puts on flesh and he starts walking this earth and says, I will get into your shoes and I will walk where you're walking and I will understand you because of my great love for you to reach you. And Jesus does this. And I love that story that every time you read a miracle of Jesus, it's usually with one person. And Jesus is doing something natural. He's walking along, he's going to this, he's doing this, he's going to synagogue, he's in the way of life. And I want to say to you, what I'm learning about life is that I just need to be involved in people's lives. I was talking to Pastor Brad the other day, great story, and I'm going to finish with this. And I was just talking about one of his youth leaders who is actually taking a lot of time to text and engage the young people. And those young people were really responding to this leader and wanting to be in their group. And really it's just simply because this person is actually going, I'm interested in you, I'm invested in you. And that person actually sends texts, encouragement, and just talks about life with these people so that there's a trust and a relationship. So that at the right time, when the time is right, those normal things make way for the supernatural things, the purposeful things, the meaningful conversations that only occur because you've got relationship, you've got trust, and because you genuinely love that person. That person says, you know what, I'm going to share my problem, my challenge, my concern, my question with this person because I trust them. And Brad was telling me about that, and he was encouraging his other leaders to follow that person example. And I said to Brad, you know what, I know this is true of you, that the way you lead your leaders at youth is exactly the same. I said, I know that you spend time talking to them, speaking to them, being involved in their lives, doing things with them, talking about how they're going, and all sorts of things other than youth leadership. And I said, and you've set them an example. And I said, you need to say to them, hey, by the way, you may not have realised this, but I've actually done a lot of normal stuff with you in order to establish a trust and a relationship so that when it comes to talking about God and about being a disciple of Jesus, I've got that relationship with you and I can give something to you because you will receive it. And I love the fact that this John talks about to those who received him and believed in him. He gave them the right to become children of God. Why? Why did they receive him? Why did they believe him? Because he got involved. He became human and God reached out to them through hands and flesh. And you know what? I got to say, that's the only way I know how to love the world. I can't love every human. I can only love the ones that God places in my way and the ones that I find coming into my life Sometimes they're not always comfortable. Sometimes they're not always nice. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're attractive and fun and engaging. Other times they're hard. But whatever the case may be, the people that God puts in your life, get involved. Get involved in the normal stuff and then pray, God, give me the opportunity to reveal your love, that this great love you have for the whole world and for every person in the world. Help me to love that person in a way that will reveal your glory through me to them, and that they might come into that glory too. So there's a challenge. I wonder what that says to you as you go into your breakout groups now, how you might take that word and apply it in your life. What does that look like in the way you love the world?